Welcome to the Minds Panel Show. And we have another packed panel, which is great. I always like when we have a lot of feedback. So tonight's panel is on the biology of anarchy, or anarchy in biology, looking to the natural systems, which I believe are decentralized, non-state systems, and that we can learn a lot from them. So, but let me introduce our panel. We have Tech Lords, we have Kevin, we have House, we have Boommeister, we have Stone Archer, we have Gov Spiders, and we have Sofuego. But what I was saying earlier is that I think a lot of ways is that we sometimes get confused or hung up on labels or ideology. And I like what Kevin said in our discussions before this, that anarchy or anarchism is a loaded word, right? When someone hears it, it either imprints a positive or negative reaction within their own mindset. And depending on who you are, how you grew up, or whatever, you have set already preconceived notions of what it is. Chaos, kind of like, the image of someone throwing a mocktail cocktail, or it's about being self-governed. And I think in this sense, we're using it as anarchy holds that if people in society organize themselves without rulers or laws, natural human instinct for altruism and cooperation will bring about a greater freedom, happiness, and equality. And I think this is kind of how nature organizes itself. That it's decentralized. We like to use that. I like to use that word actually. But so, and I was talking about when I was doing some research about how ants organize themselves to find food. So they randomly look for food, and and then one of the ants finds the food and then creates a path. So they're all like searching for food, and so they all follow the pheromones. The pheromones get them in line to follow the food. But the best path to the food, the most effective way to find the food, everybody falls in line. So it's like this dance between the chaos or the non-order into order, but into the best possible order. They organize themselves for the most benefit of the collective. So they first individually search and wander for themselves, and then they kind of go into order, not because someone told them to do it, because they get positive feedback from their pheromone trails and to follow the best path towards that. And a lot of systems follow this way, And I was talking about how um, we use these words, and a lot of ways they're static. And I think if we keep on having these discussions using words dynamically, like there's a dance between order and chaos. And if you look into chaos mathematics, it's about what we perceive as chaos actually has this elegant order towards it, the fractal nature of everything. And I find that fascinating. And it's kind of this higher order of things. It kind of, I believe, what nature follows. But I would like to now give it to Holly. And Holly is actually the one that organized this panel.
Thank you, Satori. Yes, and thank you all for being here. This is an exciting one for me. It's actually, I really haven't been on this side of the participation angle before, so it was exciting to put this together, and it's a subject. It's two topics really that that excite me, and tying the two together. At first, I knew I had a sense of what the biology of anarchy might mean, and it has sort of a dual way of thinking of it. And the first of which Satori D brought up is very accurate. There are many things that nature can teach us um, about how to think for ourselves, or how to so self-govern. I thought of another example, and that would be that there is a system that bees have, and there is a phenomenon that they go through sometimes, which is called the swarm. And if they decide they want to split off, if they maybe for a reason get too big in one area, they'll create a second bee, a queen, and take off with her. But before they do that, they have a system for triangulating different altar locations, and their triangulation system can be tracked through geometric methods. It's very precise, but these bees, much the same way as Satori you were talking about with ants, the bees take off by themselves. It's sort of their own lone mission, and so they really have to direct themselves. They have to think for themselves to just, maybe it's instinctual with them, but there is a certain amount of just self-direction. They have to go out and find these special locations where they think would be best, and then optimal for the whole swarm to go to. And then they all go back and they have sort of a consensus meeting, and they all tell each other what they've found, and they all choose a place to go. But anyway, Boommeister is here too, and she was the
Hello.
Hey there.
Are you done?
Glad you could be here. You were the inspiration for the ongoing topic. I was, which I was, pretty much thinking might be a once a month type of meeting where we could talk, an ongoing talk about anarchy, self-governance, the non-aggression principle, and of course, Boommeister is Anarchy for Dummies. It's sort of a natural that you would be in this panel. Everyone here is sort of a natural choice too for this panel, and so here we are, and with what Tori said and with the outline that I put together, the only thought I'll leave it at, and we can just open discussion back up, is that the notes that I go to when I first started trying to wrap my head around what is meant by the biology of anarchy or anarchy in biology. One question: what biologically enables us to function better as self-governed creatures? What comes naturally to us versus how we are taught to be?
I think someone needs to mute themselves.
Yes. I'm just gonna hang on for a second. Hey, House, are you there? Can you mute your mic for a second?
Where?
It's kind of adorable.
Hey, it's totally good with the flow. I'm on it. Anyway, I want to restate the questions though. These are important, and we can kind of just expand from there. What biologically enables us to function better as self-governed creatures, and what comes naturally to us versus how we are taught to be? And that touches again on something Satori mentioned about, we all grow up. No two of us grows up the same, and there are a lot of different factors that go into this. Every one of us is completely unique. Some of us are very similar. A lot of us are similar. All of us are similar to others in certain ways, not everyone. But it all has to do a lot with the programming, and we all come from a unique place. So maybe the discussion of how we understand the existence of new biological knowledge that sort of enables us and uplifts us to understand our minds better. Why anarchy, self-governance, those principles would be a natural course for where we're led once we have the knowledge that we can self-drive.
Yeah, I think that's really great. Probably the biggest thing I took from that was humans, unlike almost everything else on the planet, not everything, so I'm probably wrong on this, have the ability to watch other systems and then compare them to themselves and then make changes based on that on a much more conscious level than pretty much anything else. So I know I'm probably one of the few people that when people say, oh, let's go with how nature does everything, I'm like, oh, nature's actually pretty harsh and invasive species, kill off all these other people, and like as a whole it looks balanced, but individually they're kind of just all eating each other. But what we can do from that is look at it and learn and move on and grow. So I absolutely think biology is part of that, because that's what makes us unique as a species on this planet, is being able to observe and change and grow from everything instead of being stuck in an instinctual cycle or just living off of fear, living off of, I just need to eat, so what am I going to do tomorrow, is we can kind of build on that and get better instead of just kind of running in the same circle. So I hope that made sense.
Yeah, but I also think too, we are developing the way. I think too, a lot of our ways of our our intelligence is that we started off with very static ideologies and words that we use, and we're learning that actually nature is not that simple as far as and even to what Holly in some of the notes was that we're not a slave to our genes, and also to, as we look more closely and study these systems, that they are not just on a kind of short mechanism of, oh, okay, we're just going to do either eat or be eaten. Actually, as they work out these quote unquote random chaos of them finding their niches, a lot of ways it's about the ecosystem finding some harmony, and that it's not just this the violence for violence sake in any ways, but it's to that there's this underlying order of finding some kind of balance and being and a system that supports every kind of the whole collective in a sense. And I think that's what we're finding out as the more and more we study the natural order of how things grow, and it's kind of interesting what we're finding out in that field. Holly, do you have anything to add to that?
I certainly do. I think that to build on that, we all come from a unique place, but we all live together too, and we have different types of ways that we live in communities, or not. And the interesting study for me is how one might view the rules of living by a life of anarchy or self-governance that live in a city versus ones that live in more of a rural setting. There is, I think, just in my opinion, it makes sense, and it becomes natural that going to more of a socialistic nature is natural for existing in a city atmosphere. When you get outside of a city or a large community, you kind of tend to have a little bit more of a self-reliance because you're not communing as intensely. There are different levels of intensity here that we all work with. And even if you live in the country, it's all about you and how you view intensity too. So that's relative. But with those two different existences in mind, one is they both just are what they are. There are choices we make of where we want to be, we want to surround ourselves with. The systems that we sometimes just have to endure, I think especially in more of an urban setting, really just are a sacrifice for what we want to do as far as being around, being in a larger community like that, being closer, being more connected. Honestly, there are a lot of connection advantages to being in an urban area. So I could totally see that. Where I come from, basically, I grew up in a small town in southern Colorado, and so I was social to a certain degree, but also lived in the country and went to school in town, for example. So I didn't necessarily have the same mentality as that. But it's always interesting for me to hear things from the perspective of someone who does. I tend to look toward a lot more solace, peace, silence. It's a lot easier to gain that for me outside of large communities. The energy is much more intense that way. But I'll gather that back in by just saying this, that the reason I went there was just to mark on the significance of perspective in terms of where we all tend to need to go with our own perspective and how that relates to what we would gain from having a self-directed life, and how it would all fit in.
Yeah, and I think too, it's all this dynamic non-dualistic nature of everything, and this is what I think we're progressing more and more towards. You know, the more we look to ourselves to govern ourselves, we see that kind of mirror out and into the world, and there's structures helping us this. But I would like to go to EcoTorque, and I know this is a subject that he's well versed in, and anything to do with anarchy and how you see it maybe expressed in nature.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you good.
Okay, sorry. Well, you sprung it on me a bit early. The balance between order and chaos, for me, is expressed in a tree quite well. If you look at, say, all oak trees are oak trees, and yet each one's individual. They're completely different to each other, as well as being quite similar, as you were saying just now, I think, Holly. So that, the symbol of the Druid faith is a tree, an oak tree. I suppose if there's any faith I'm closest to, I suppose that'd be it, but I don't follow any particular religion. Yeah, the unity in diversity, the common law is what I'm particularly interested in, is what's common to all of us. That's how it evolved. In the first place, it was the common elements of all the different kingdoms in England years ago, before the different kingdoms were all united. They were all brought together into the common law, which became, the unifying principle of social order. If you like, do no harm, basically. Do not injure your neighbour. Can I come in a bit later? I'm a bit. I had to sleep.
Yeah, no problem. I know it's yeah.
Woken up.
Yeah, no problem. It's really late for you. Thanks for coming in. Anybody else want to maybe pick up on this of how we could look to nature to like express these kind of more dynamic systems, and I think this is a lot too of where a lot of problems with our systems is that they're not dynamic, and the problem with centralized systems is that they can't evolve to the rate of reflecting it to keep on self-correcting itself. That's the problem with kind of a bureaucracy, right? It's so behind in a lot of things.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest take from systems in nature that we can pick up is the decentralization, because a lot of stuff, especially in cities, is so centralized that like you have a power outage somewhere for more than 3 days and like half the city goes up to flames and you're just like, oh god, what's going on? But pretty much taking care of it, protecting themselves, everything like that. So
yeah, I think I kind of lost you a little bit, but
yeah, I think you.
Oh, there we
go.
go.
Sorry.
No, you were cutting out a little bit, but continue on.
Oh, sorry. I said even in a city, physically having to like move everything apart, but just kind of creating little co-ops and little neighborhoods and things like that have food storage, that are growing things, that have backups for the regular stuff that they need in case anything happens. So I just think that's a good thing everyone could kind of move towards.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like I think the important core philosophy of anarchism is being self-governed. So it starts with you governing yourself, and then it branches out to maybe your collectives or communities and owning your local space. And if everybody kind of owns themselves and then spreads out to owning their local space, it kind of goes out fractally in scale, right? And it starts branching out, and then you kind of have more of this ecosystem or this feedback. But EcoTorque, you wanted to add something?
I think I'm hearing a description of permaculture.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that.
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah, beautiful. I mean, totally, in cities, to decentralize and to have local communities and the backup you're talking about, absolutely, yeah, 100% with you on that. Just want to say that, yeah. Thank you. Brilliant.
And I that's definitely something I think most of us here are kind of on the same page with that. and and I think we have to do this, right, to live in more of effective manner. There's so much waste. There's so much waste of resources, so much waste of energy, so much waste of money, and it's all because we kind of given up some of our, unknowingly or knowingly given up like our powers. Like, oh, we let this, our cities handle this thing, and we kind of just focus in and go about our stuff. But so Holly, any do we want to kind of emphasize this a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah, I think that I like what you said about the fact that there are systems that are in place. We may or may not be dissatisfied with those, but probably one of the more dissatisfying aspects is that they are static. They don't really and they're not evolved. There are old systems in place that I think that we could all evolve a little easier without. And so if you take a look at that and you relate it to, they're a reality, I suppose. Are they? I guess they're a reality. They're a reality to me because, there are certain things that seem to be damn hard to avoid. But when it comes down to it, when we have a knowledge of how we can self-direct, how do we function through a system? And this is biological knowledge. This is knowledge that we know. If we don't know it, we find it out. And there are a million resources that we can look to further our knowledge of how our own minds, how our own brains work, how our body works with our minds, and help us along a self-directed path. How at one point do we come to the place where we realize the static, antiquated systems that are in place? How do we come to the place where we know we've outgrown them? And then how do we do that on a mass scale? Because the knowledge that is out there, the knowledge that we can possess, knowledge that all of us possess on one level or another, enables us to really kind of leave these systems behind, go a different direction, go outside of them, form different ways. Ecotor, you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I presume you've heard of the 100th monkey.
Yeah.
I love the 100th monkey.
Yeah, I mean that's it's just going to happen. One day we're going to wake up and it will have happened all by itself. We'll just wake up in the morning and it'll be going, oh my god, it's happened! Hooray!
Exactly. Yeah, just one person at a time until you hit that tipping point.
But it's kind of funny because look at how the progression of, let's say, the panel has been, right? We had a few people in the beginning, and now twice in a row we had a packed panel and more people getting involved. And I think these ideas of us getting these feedbacks, and this fractal nature of us realizing our own power, right? And then once we kind of like get enough of that, this energy has to spill out, and so we spill it out into minds, and then other people that resonate with that kind of gravitate towards it. And there's no one telling them, hey, come and view my page or come in to have these conversations or get involved. Like, ultimately, you are your authority of yourselves, and how you kind of like conduct yourself creates your community around you. And then now we are all at this kind of like boiling point of, okay, we have all these great discussions now. Let's try to convert that into systems. That's why we have the Minds culture and kind of the governance. And this is where we're butting up against, I guess. But
absolutely, I think leading by example is far more effective in just about anything you're trying or anyone's trying to do than the idea of like converting people or how can we get everyone to do this. Just do it yourself. It'll kind of get people seeing what's happening instead of just trying to convince them by words. So absolutely, I'm just agreeing with you. Sorry for rambling.
Yeah, no problem. I am definitely about that, and it's hard too because sometimes and I think this is all we talked about, maturing as far as your communication and maturing how you handle yourself socially, right? A lot of times, especially when I was younger too, I'll be really frustrated, right? I believed I had an idea, and I'll be going like telling people, oh, you need to like do this or you need to do that, and I get really frustrated. But it's also to the way I kind of communicated it, and kind of butting up against your head. And then it's a lot of ways too. I think I was talking about this on the other show. We're thinking it too, that in a lot of ways you're always talking to yourself. Like you're getting frustrated with somebody. It's usually because you're frustrated with yourself. You're not necessarily all right with yourself or in harmony with yourself. And this is kind of a frustrating thing. You always look to the outside, right? Oh, I can't stand fast food. I can't stand this or that. It's so horrible. Well, you don't need to go eat fast food. You can learn how to grow your own food. You could cook for yourself. You could do different various things to. It's all within your control. And as you do that, a little bit of my background. I'm a cook, and there was this experience because I never grew up. Like I did fine dining for a while, and there's problems with that. But the main thing is that I started doing everything from scratch, and there was this night and day difference between me kind of like owning how I cooked food and how I viewed food, and then sharing that experience. And like I would have these brunches, and I have my family over, and I had a little garden, and it's so amazing to show someone like especially a little kid that never seen. I remember I had this conversation with my niece, and she was 3 years old, and she would come up to me. It's like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Oh, that's a carrot." She's like, "No, that's not a carrot, because all she saw was the carrot top, right?" I was like, "No, that's a carrot." And then so when I pulled it out of the ground, like her mind was blown. Oh my god! And she went crazy. So like giving people that experience, and this is kind of what's hard too. Like I don't think any of us truly have had this. We all have kind of like longed for this experience of working in a more natural way, or working in a more freer way. I mean, Boomeister, she grew up in a collective, which maybe she has more experience of this. But
oddly, no, I don't.
You know what I mean?
We work with a lot of businesses in the area. We hardly do anything ourselves.
Yeah, it's so hard, right? It's so hard to kind of like have that experience, and I think it starts with little steps.
Yeah, and it's hard to be self-sufficient. Like, I totally understand people that are like, oh, we should totally do this, it'll be great, but they're not doing anything, and I'm like, I'm kind of one of those. Like, I have 2 basil plants, and everything else I've kind of killed. Like, it's really hard. So, yeah, if we could kind of make it easier, make it more exciting, anything like that helps, because it's, so sorry for the squealing. It's definitely the way to go, but, yes, it can be extremely difficult.
And that's where kind of I think where we're getting towards is, and this is maybe as social networking really evolves to being social, right? And this is kind of what we're troubleshooting here, is that we're not only just crowdsourcing information, crowdsourcing talent, crowdsourcing. So it's like we all have a little bit of piece to the puzzle. Some of us are more inclined to do certain things, and that as we fit together. And like this is, I loved how Holly's progressing with the Minds Panel show. She did a really great job with the notes, and frankly, we need more of that. And it's just good habit. I mean, I started doing it in the beginning, and then I kind of veered away from it. I mean, all of us have certain inklings, and that as we learn more from each other, we kind of naturally kind of have this cohesion, right? And I think this is how nature forms its groups in the niches, the niches, maybe there's butting heads, and maybe there's arguments, and maybe there's this friction, but at a certain point, for the whole ecosystem to survive, there has to be some collaboration, some harmony that happens. So it's not that, oh, we just have anarchy or we just have decentralization, but it's like this dance between the two, and I love using the fractal examples, and this is the dance between a 0 and a 1, a negative and a positive that actually creates our whole reality. And that if we think more dynamically in the way we think and express ourselves, and I think this is what we're doing when we see new ways of trying to express ourselves. And I think partly this is why I do remixes, because I want to kind of engage somebody in a different way. I once had this dream, and I gave like this lecture in this to this crowd, and I was in a music festival, and basically what stood out to me is like, why can't you say something deep and have a sick ass beat? Meaning, why can't you like make it fun, but also like, why is it those are mutually exclusive? Like, and EcoTurk has been talking about this. We're veering a little bit away, but I'm talking about like how we convert this energy that we have, right? How do we make something go viral that is not just meaningless, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And everybody kind of has these great ideas, and we get frustrated. I know a lot of people get frustrated with this. I know I do as well. But like, it would be so great if we could have that 100 monkey phenomenon of going viral with a permaculture message, with a more organic message, and it sticks. Because sometimes you have these campaigns that go viral, but they stop at all. You just change your filter, right? Oh, I just changed my filter to a rainbow flag or whatever, and it stops at there. But how do we convert that energy? And I think unknowingly and knowingly we're doing this, and I think this is because we're part of nature, and I think we lost our way a little bit in thinking we're not part of nature, kind of taking us away from there. But yeah, EcoTurk.
You're telling the world, right?
Sorry?
Go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've been involved kind of in the alternative movement some 38 years now. I'm 58 now, so since I was 19 when I went to Stonehenge Free Festival and got my first LSD when I went there. That really was my first experience of real anarchy and how it could work so beautifully. There was like 50, 60,000 people in a field, and all taking all kinds of different illegal substances, not unlawful, illegal, I stress that, and all having a great time, most of the time having a great time. Anybody who had trouble would be looked after and taken care of. Beautifully it worked. All the roads and the streets just formed naturally. Oh, amazing! Just that really set me off on my path that way. But what's missing, in my opinion, out of the alternative movement, if you like, is a practical way forward, which the builders, the farmers, the engineers, the miners, the fishermen, the drivers, the lumberjacks, they can say, yes, I want to do that instead. That's what's missing. And I don't think we're going to really get a sustained campaign which is going to actually have real effects until we have a campaign for something which is positive and practical and very simple enough that those people, not to patronise the tradesmen at all, they're not stupid people, but it has to be, I think, and it's got to be practical. And permaculture is basically simple, and it's practical, and it works. It's been shown to work. I think really that's the way forward. I'd just like to put in my own definition of permaculture, which is to use all of our splendid and amazing technologies for the benefit of humanity as they were intended by the inventors of the technologies, which they're not being used for that purpose. They're being used to make profit, which is, anathema, and it's completely missing the point of having technology. The whole point of technology is to make our lives easier for ourselves, and in fact, it was sold to us, the mass production, the technology, the Industrial Revolution was sold to us on the basis of it being convenient and that we'd have plenty of time. And yet now, we're working 60 hours a week, 2 people in a household, and still can't make ends meet. I'm going off the tangent a little bit, but to have a sustained and effective campaign, it's got to be practical. That's absolute bottom line for me. It has to be practical.
Yeah, and I like to use some technical terms, but user friendly, and this is what things get adopted, right? Because it's actually just more efficient and user friendly. But I think maybe should we go back to maybe more looking at biology as expression for maybe simple systems that we could mimic? Holly or Lee?
Yeah, yes, we're both here. We're actually, there's more than just the two of us here. And yes, I want to address what you were just saying, and a thought occurred to me. I'll make this short because I have something else I need to do here too. The thought occurs to me that I originated a topic that would be called Biology of Anarchy, but really it's the Science of Anarchy. That's so much more inclusive. The science of our lives, the science of our self-drive, the science of our cooperativeness, the science of all of it coming together. That is great. And Reclaim the Lie, I really appreciate your words too, because it speaks to where society has really driven us in terms of our programming, what we're supposed to be doing in their terms, and we have to look back to our own terms. I have two words, and you guys have heard these words before, that Lee was really the conceptual benefactor of, but that I've really embraced and that I love him for a lot. Wiki being is sort of the place that I go to when I hear about where we're going to all go to collaborate and organize and talk about the things that are going on with all of us. Lobby Voice is the other one, and that is the system that is blockchain driven, that is a cooperative system as well, that really is more about the voting system, not voting in the sense it's not lobbying, it's really about we're lobbying ourselves with other people that are really wanting the same things and wanting a change in static systems that exist for us. We know we're better than that. We know we're more evolved than that, and we can contribute in that fashion. We have we have a neighbor who has a loud motorcycle, so excuse that if you will. If you guys happen to hear that, but anyway, good. That's pretty much calmed down a little bit again. We have a dev team that we're working to build here. I think that I will take this opportunity to hand the mic over to Lee, and we'll introduce a couple of other members that are special guests from this end. So Lee, can I take it away?
Hi guys, it's nice to join in. I'm here with some very special people. My two sons at Ride of Life and at Navarre 22, and we're learning together how to build these platforms. Alex at Ride of Life is going to be working with Rust and helping me figure out how to get that collaborative with MadeSafe platform.
You guys
Be working with the mobile stuff. What's that?
Oh, you just muted yourself. But yeah, continue on. Sorry.
What did you hear?
You just said that you're gonna do the MadeSafe, and then it kind of went out, and then came back to some mobile app. I think is what we heard when you came back.
Right. So my youngest boy, he's really good at JavaScript, and he's going to be helping me with the mobile end of it. So I want to introduce you to Ray.
Hi, I'm Ray. Hello, nice to meet you guys.
And Alex.
Hi, it's nice to be a part of this. I'm really excited to be collaborating.
Yeah, nice to meet you guys. Welcome.
So this is our dev team.
So yeah, it's
welcome.
The dream team, right?
So that's it's I suppose our vision from our little corner of the world, but it's awesome to have these guys here with us, and it's going to be a little while in the making, but with these guys here, it's very inspiring to think about the way that not just us, everyone is involved in this, everyone all over the world, that the systems that we can create that fit us better, that fit our more evolved selves, can work for us instead of us having to work for them. With the 60-hour is too much of our lives, that we have to go away from our families, go away from ourselves, our lives, our meaningfulness, the things that we need to do. Thank you so much, Navar 22 and Right of Life, for joining us. I know we went off a little bit of on that, but it's great to be able to introduce them here. So I'll hand it back over.
No, yeah, thank you. Actually, I think to circle back, Gov Spiders wanted to use the talking stick.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna flip all the way back to actually your first point, and sort of ties into a lot of things we've been talking, is this idea of this dynamic scaling on the way that all of this works. Is we've talked in the last show about how a lot of these ways of thinking work on in smaller communities pretty flawlessly through individual consensus, and you can't really get everyone's consensus in a large government and all of these different things. But tying into nature, you were talking about ants in a line, and Tim from N99 Life as People always talks about ants, and it's really inspiring. It's hard to believe that you could be inspired by ants, but it's really cool. Their efficiency in still being individuals, but knowing that it is more efficient to follow the line to get to the next food source, sort of thing, and that is organized, but very distributed, and also has individual consensus based upon efficiency. And that's sort of the idea we're looking at. And all of these different ant colonies essentially are all distributed, sort of doing their own things in smaller groups that represent a smaller group of people, rather than trying to create some sort of one world government where everyone has some false consensus given to them by people that don't really represent them, which is what we're sort of dealing with today. But I think moving forward with those types of principles to bring them into the modern age, we were talking about blockchain-driven consensus. We always talk about that. And I suppose that could lead to sort of mob mentality, and what democracy really is at its purest basis is people sort of dogpiling on opinions and views until they sort of scratch out liberties. But if we had some sort of mutual benefit for all parties involved for decentralized innovation, and that's sort of what we've got here on the Minds Panel show, is all of us, the more work we put in, the better the show is, the more people get involved, and the more fun we have overall. But also that all of these systems must scale perfectly, and it really relates sort of to the Minds app. Just to say, sorry, I didn't remember the name. Right of Life and Revnar, I think, was what it was. Rust and JavaScript. Those are definitely the future of all of the great decentralized projects right now. That's exactly what I would recommend, with a little pinch of Node in there, because Node is fantastic. But all of these systems sort of have to scale from the individual to a large population. So the lone wolf must sort of have the same policies and governance as the entire populace, sort of thing, that they all must work together. And that's kind of like how the Minds browser works when it scales down to the mobile. When you're on your mobile browser, everything has to be able to properly scale down to that size and be able to scale up to a 4K screen, and everything sort of has to still be in order. And I just thought all of those sort of have similar themes.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the challenge, or also is about the scalability of all of this, which is really interesting. And I think too, in a lot of ways, keeping things simple makes it able for it to be dynamic as well. And we don't see any necessarily scaling problems within nature, because they all kind of like reflect each other, like what you were saying, is that this, the smallest pieces kind of build up in these building blocks to larger pieces. And I always like these images that you see about the fractal nature of how the organization of your iris is like the organization of the galaxy. That they scale up within the same kind of a fractal chaos patterns, and that if we could look towards that to kind of organize our systems. But it's funny because it's really we don't have to look anywhere else because it's within us. And I think this is kind of, let's go back to what Holly did in her outline, is that we're learning a lot by the biology, right? About how really our dynamic system works within us and how that mirrors out to, should actually more mirror out to how we work. And a lot of this is about your perception. Not only like we were talking on the last panel, is that if we get into a funk, so say you're in a depression and you hunch your back, and then you start firing off all these chemicals that help sustain that, and then it kind of like degrades the systems. But if you go into a happy, what Bruce Lipton talks about is the honeymoon phase. You have all these endorphins that get attracted, and then your actual cells resonate with that feeling. And we have a lot of examples of this of earlier, not to put Techler's in the spot, but he was playing some music, and just the act of him playing the music kind of changed my whole mood. I felt really relaxed. I felt really prepared. I felt really ready to go for the show. And that as we are able more and more to express ourselves, and I think that reflects our true nature. As we try to, part of quote unquote awakening is to get off all of these artificial layers to us and to peel them off till we get to kind of our natural state. And we are all individuals and we express ourselves kind of differently, but the more and more we communicate, we see this commonality of us. It's so funny how now what you were saying about the ants is actually a really more effective way. Instead of a content address, you're addressing how you access files through content, and that's versus in a centralized server. And so it kind of does what the ants does, right? It goes and searches for the signal, and it finds the shortest path to it, and retrieves it. But that's what we should do with our resources within how we build our communities, right? You having all these great designs, designing our cities, our communities more effectively, and we could look to permaculture, these earth ships, as great examples. Like when you build an igloo or adobe house, not only you're using the earth, but the earth has this very dynamic nature where it, at one sense, can warm you when it's really cold, but in another sense, it keeps it cool. It keeps a constant temperature, and it's amazing how dynamic nature is. And I think this goes on to health. Why the beauty of let's say marijuana, right? Because it's not only the THC. I mean, they used to try to extract the THC and put it in pill form, and it didn't have the same effect because of the it's a dynamic chemical that kind of goes into it, and not only does it have the THC, but it has another, all these other chemicals that help you to heal and inflammation. This is what they found out about peyote, because they used to use peyote as a cleansing slash ritual to help a sick person. And what they found out is not only does it make you like do this vomiting natural reaction, so that actually cleanses you of whatever toxins, but it also has an antibiotic, when you look at the science. And so these ayahuasca is a dynamic brew. And so, we looked to these pills as a static way. Oh, you just take this, and it's very static, one chemical, and that's very rudimentary of our learning. And now we need to branch out to a more dynamic way of where the integral nature of things and how they mutually support each other and have this kind of flow of nurturing and attacking, I guess, in a sense. So it's not only just one part of it. But anybody else want to touch on that?
Yeah, can I jump in for a sec?
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
Yeah, it sounds like everybody's touching on some really good points, and from what I've heard, the way I would sum it up is we need. I think I said this on a previous show. Was I think that the way forward is going to be we're going to have to take a few steps back first.
Yeah.
We've got all these people living in these, mega cities, and my parallel to that is what was being said about information gathering, the shortest distance between 2 points. Well, the thing is that our points are apart. Have ecosystem. You want to talk about the biology of anarchy. Well, biology and an ecosystem are kind of the same thing. It's a biofeedback system. Excuse me. That if more people had even just a couple acres of land in order to provide for themselves what they could upon it, well, then you've shortened the distance between those 2 points. Between your food, your water, and yourself. And you wouldn't have to be going so far, or have to leave your own property to go labor for someone else in order to provide yourself and your family with those things that you can't produce on your own land. And, when you did leave, the goods and services that you provided for other people in order to, make money or whatever we evolved to, those goods and services wouldn't have to go as far. That's the way it was in the pre-industrial, before the Industrial Revolution. Most goods were made in small workshops that were powered by, wind, water, and human labor. And those goods that were made usually didn't travel very far. The technology of the day wasn't nearly as advanced as what we've got today. So we've got a leg up on our predecessors in how to make those things more efficient. And I've seen, I think it was a TED Talk about this lady talking about she wanted to garden in her apartment, and that led her into thinking about food scarcity in a big city should something bad happen. And she started an open source apartment gardening app or website or something. I'm not for certain, but because she read some books about apartment gardening, and she wanted to get some more information on it that wasn't readily available. So she found a way through an open source system to get in touch with more people to grow different things, form better systems, people having ideas and trying them out and improving upon each other's designs. So, and that right there to me is an ecosystem. That's a biological or a biofeedback system. It's not quite as like, hormones within a endocrine system, or different animals within the same ecological system, the wolves eat the sick deer kind of thing. But I definitely think that as far as on an individual basis, in order to achieve what we're really wanting, we got to decentralize ourselves. You got, I don't know, 5 million people in New York City. I'm kind of throwing a guess out there. But really, how decentralized can you get if everybody's all crammed up in one spot? People piled on top of one another, and, so I think until we start seeing a larger shift outside of, or, people, waking up and, finding out that, hey, that, we really need to, decentralize ourselves across the landscape in order to provide for ourselves and our posterity better with a cleaner, healthier environment and a better way of living, you know, that's maybe one of the issues that, or the messages that we really need to emphasize upon. You know, and so I've been talking long enough. I'm going to go ahead and let it go.
Yeah, I mean that is a big one. Go, Boomeister.
Oh, I was saying that's great, and definitely to add to that, sort of go back to what we were talking about before, is making this movement kind of viral and make it exciting so it doesn't stop, is either using technology we have today or something to make gardening so that you can be more diverse. Because I know especially for me, a lot of it is like, yes, I can garden, yes, I can make my own food, but I live in Seattle. I can get any food from anywhere around the planet almost any time of day. So the idea of going back to like just eating what I can make in a garden of things that are local here, I'm kind of like, oh, that's like cutting out like 90% of my diet. But I know there's ways to grow things, and you can do them indoors and all this different stuff. So I think that should be something that's kind of added in with the learning how to garden, is maybe being able to do more variety than just what's kind of local to where you live. Because it totally sounds snotty, but yeah, I'd hate to give up, you know, my Thai food and things like that to go back to like just living off my own garden.
Yeah, and I know what you mean, but and this is where I think we're already moving towards this, and you have all these different things, and I think it's evolving, and hopefully it keeps on evolving, because you know, you could design it in such a way that, you know, where you share, like you emphasize on growing on herbs, like you were saying, you have a couple basil plants or whatever, and maybe you're just good tending to herbs, and there's someone that's, you know, maybe likes more exotic food, and then you guys have kind of like a co-op. I know, actually, how Corey, how does your food co-op work?
Oh, okay, it's awesome. Well, there's like several options if you live in a city. Like it's a little hard in some respects. If you don't, like, I got really lucky and able to grow my own food, but like for the longest time I wasn't. So, you know, I'm a member of my local food co-op where they basically everyone volunteers 2 hours a week and stuff like that, and you know takes over like specific working groups, and you know everyone susses out like the best like kind of distributors to like source from. Kind of like try to like put emphasis on local. What's that? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, continue on.
Oh, okay. But there's also, aside from co-op, which is like even more like, I mean, the co-op is great, but like, you know, you get tempted to buy stuff outside of it. What I find really cool is the idea, I don't know if you guys know like community like supported agriculture, which is basically a CSA. It's what it stands for. And basically it's growing popularity in the city where you actually like groups of farmers like kind of get together and they offer people shares. You buy like shares into the produce that they do in the season in advance, and it helps them like kind of prepare out their season. You know what I mean? Like it eliminates some of the risk, like brings some like, you know, more able to do local, and then you know you basically throughout the season you kind of get this food that you bought in advance, and it kind of like it's good motivation to just like, you know, you have it coming already, you got it already, and it's good motivation to be more local.
Yeah, actually, it's so funny because when I've been in these different talks with different people about different projects, and one of it, we had him on, Jim, and it's the Devi, but there's this other guy, Michael, that was a part of it, and so basically it's like decentralized kind of crowdfunding, but in a way that is not only just about financing, but crowdsourcing knowledge, or crowdsourcing expertise or talent. And so you're kind of like, wherever you're lacking in your proposal, you have someone that maybe they're an accountant, and they said, oh, I could offer 2 hours, and you join up, and so like all these different people, and it's all based on how you feel about the proposal, and it's all up to the individual to get into whatever they want to get into. But his thing was, he's in a think tank, and me and him started talking because he was saying that he is doing these hydroponic modules, and I seen some of them, If anybody's seen anything with the open source ecology, where they're building these kind of like tools that to build like civilizations, like a starter pack for building societies in a sense, and they have these self-sustaining hydroponic or aquaponic systems, and so he was kind of talking about that, and it was so funny because me and him kind of have a similar story. I used to try to for like a whole year working farmers markets and keep it to whole organic food and sustainable packaging and all this kind of stuff. And I said the problem with that is that the margin of profit is zero, like almost none. Like we were just like I was actually not getting paid anything. It was just sustaining the company. But I did it because that's where my kind of ethos of that was that I was like, man, if you could get the organic farming to be at the same price level of the non-organic food, competing with these Monsanto's people, right? That's a game changer. So then you could do it and compete with other people, because that was a lot of problem. Not everybody stood to this organic, sustainable stuff, so they would kind of like cheat in a sense, and so they were able to offer their prices cheaper than me, and people don't really look into it or whatever, and so this created this problem that we had. But so he was actually working to address that issue in using some science, but also working in a kind of more a permaculture way. And so that everybody's kind of working on different pieces of the puzzle, and we need to kind of like merge ideas and start getting people together, in like the same rooms that have similar ideas but take it from different perspectives. And this is where us expressing ourselves creatively or with our identity and matching up with people that maybe have the same idea but work it in a different way. Some people are more planners, some people are more creative, some people have practical technical skills or whatever it is, and that we find our niches within our groups and we start working small, and somebody keeps the idea of making it a module, so then it could be packaged to people and they could use it however they want to use it. But yeah, EcoTorque.
Yeah, in terms of the costs of organic farming, I'm from Devon. I was brought up in the countryside myself. I'm living in London now, but that was always a struggle. And it occurred to me that they don't take into account a whole lot of costs. I mean, a lot of the chemical farming is subsidised for one thing, and there's tax breaks and all kinds of things like that, and favourable loan rates to people that adopt chemical farming. But one of the main things that isn't taken into account is the medical costs of chemical farming. Not only to the farmer but to the consumer. That none of that is taken into account. And if it were, I think you'd probably find that organic farming is probably far, far, far cheaper than what they call conventional farming now.
Yeah, and also too how it strips the nutrients from the soil, and so you have to go and the more you use the chemicals, the more you have to do it, and it creates this, because you're extracting said value instead of having a self-sustaining system. And I don't think we have yet, in the whole collective of humanity, and maybe it's because it's blocked by certain people that is not within their interest and they want to keep the power or whatever it is, but thinking that holistic way of counting in true value. We measure only things by the somewhat in the bottom line or by money and tallying these numbers, but time, attention, the impact of the environment, all these have value and should be factored in how we evaluate where we're going. Like finding the most efficient way, that route to what we need as a whole. But we also have Be Damn Smart here. Hey, what's up, Be Damn Smart? God, you made it. We can't hear you.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
I just wanted to say that to me, food security is fundamental to anarchy, and that's something that we sort of broach. I live in a small community, mostly surrounded in farmers. We do co-op collectives and crop sharing, food sharing. We have a farmers market where we try to keep everything we can regional. Of course, coffee and some things are not potentials, but in terms of structure, like Gearmeister was saying, I was a Seattleite too, Gearmeister. That's really cool. But everything being available to a city dweller, fresh, that's part of the system that's in the cusp of change. And so root cellaring, building into canning, having food stores may seem a bit of a ridiculous thing, but if even just a little ripple from the Brexit vote gives us any indication of how quickly the dynamics can change, especially with energy changing, that there's quite a bit going on the horizon. And I would also add that in technology, as far as growing crops, things of sustainable food archetypes, like container gardening is probably going to become one of the quickest forthcoming technologies, where we're going to see stacks of 48, 53-foot containers running on LEDs, and it's going to be kind of like a robotic pick your own dispensary to some extent, with tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers. Those things are going to be growing under supplemented low voltage lighting probably within the next decade in our larger city centers. And the technology is getting low. There's a plethora of containers there. Their half shelf life is much shorter than their functional life, and they keep changing the parameters about their sizing and their spacing. So there's probably 200,000 or 300,000 of them as just a functional building supply tool that's very simple to augment and change. So when we talk about anarchy in terms of food security, I do believe we're on the cusp of some pretty interesting changes going forward that a lot of us who are non-rural will deal with, and the people. I think a lot was talked about having the space in between us to actually interface with our Earth Mother. That's truly relevant to being a true anarchist. Is like your Earth will tell you the primary functions, the universal laws about sustainability and defense, and it's all very self-evident once you expose yourself to that mindset. So that's just something I wanted to throw in there.
Thank you. That was actually really good. Anybody else want to bring? Oh, there we go. Be done smart. Are you there? I think we're having problems with your mic. You're not coming in.
I got you.
Oh, there we go.
Okay,
cool.
there I am. I had my darn mute button on my cord. Sorry about that, but yeah, I could jump in here for a minute. I like to bring things back to the beginning, so I guess the farthest history we have back that has a decent record is Cicero. And in the Law of Nations of 1852 by Chitty Esquire, he described the purpose of government and how things work, and then how to use the logic and reason to find what people are supposed to do and who you're supposed to celebrate, why you're supposed to celebrate them. But he celebrates every person that comes to a country, because the more people that you can get into a country, the stronger the country can be. But secondly, his emphasis of that was it allows people to produce more so that you have the food, because no matter where you land out on the earth, the first thing you have to do is take care of your food. So if people can take care of the food, then that allows other people to do other things, which is become more advanced or produce more or different things. So the key concept was once a nation does start, or they handle the food, and the food was the most important, then they start producing. If they have an excess, they would trade that with other countries. So this is where the concept of we work together, but we're not limited. We're by helping another country, you're helping yourself, because as that other country rises up and is able to produce.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, you got muted again.
There we go. Where did I get muted at?
You were talking about as other countries, and then
Okay, as other countries get better doing what they do, which is produce food and then produce what they specialize in, then this is where the trade comes in. So by helping another country, you're making them stronger, yes, but you're also making yourself stronger, because they're producing more that can give back to you. So we've got a problem in the U.S. is where right now what our establishment is doing is it's attacking the farmers and the ranchers and trying to claim the land, and it's forcing them off using not legislative but legal fines and stuff to bury a person in lawyer fees and fines and having to answer these things and go to court, and this is how they're more or less stealing the land, which is why the Oregon thing was such a big deal. But you have to understand that no matter what you do, you always have to consider the farmer first and the food that you produce. So, anybody want to jump in there for a second?
Can I just say, in the common law of conversion, which is all aspects of theft, just to jump on that thing about them using a legal process to basically steal people's land, it says in the law of conversion, it says using a legal process without a moral justification to gain another person's property is theft. And I've always questioned the Enclosures Act in this country, where all the common land was taken away from the people and put in the hands of private individuals. You know, what was the moral justification for that? And in light of what those individuals have done with the land since then, what is the moral justification for them to keep it? I can't see any moral justification whatsoever. But just to say that, I don't know if that was used in that Seattle case. I haven't been following it. Was it? Did they try that element of the common law?
What they're doing here is we adopted the feudal system the same way it came from England. So what's happening is they're trying to transfer power back to the state or the government, and then specifically the federal government. See, people forget that, you know, like you can say, oh yeah, we got a national constitution of the United States, and then say all that, but why do we have state constitutions? Nobody brings that up. Nobody mentions those, because you can't have the federal one unless you have a state one, you know, and the state is where you live. Somebody jumping in?
Yeah, Be Damn Smart, I wanted to elaborate just a little bit on what you're saying, and with all due respect, I think what I'd like to do at this point is just say that the science of anarchy, the things that we're talking about, are concepts that you make very good points on, and that really it's time to move ahead of, evolve past, you know, like what you were saying, and the concept of constitutions or things like that. These are all terms that we're very familiar with, but they may be built in antiquities, and they may not be relevant at all to a decentralized state of more like using the word state as state of cooperativism, you know, cooperativism and self-drive, but making it in a way that we all relate to each other in the most scalable way. You know, Gov put it very well that we do need to look out for these things of scalability, but also we've touched on that subject, and it is a scalable thing. What this forum is really, trying to address is that we have it in our minds to move past all of these things. The more we understand about our minds, and the more I understand about what we understand about our minds, the more I realize how important it is that we feel, and that we feel, and that we pay attention to those feelings, and those abilities, if well driven, enable us to think our way out of any of these old and antiquitous situations. The topic of government is one that we always seem to get into, but what I really want to emphasize here is that government should just exist within ourselves, and that is I don't mean that as a demonstrative statement, but we are our own government, really. We are the government of the 50 trillion cells that make up our body. And once we shirk all of these antiquities and don't reflect anymore on systems that may have been built by very intelligent men, but that are going to be completely obliterated by these new systems that are moving forward with things like blockchain technology. I won't go on too long, but I really honestly think that we can digress to a point. The mind, though, is where we have to look for the knowledge that we need to develop systems that surpass the old way of thinking.
Okay, I'm with you on that, and I actually like to build from a basis of, Tao Ching, where he starts with one produces two produces three, or actually three produce all, or two produce all. So I understand it, but I also need to remember where we came from so that we don't repeat any of the problems of the past. And that gets back into the money system, where we shouldn't be using money anyway, but we're so used to it and so accustomed to it that it's hard for us to wean ourselves off of it.
Well, let me jump in with the money thing. Only because being an anarchist, I think you should absolutely be able to be an anarcho-capitalist if you want. I think really where the line needs to be drawn is between making money so that you can live and get things that you want, and then just being a greedy fuck, basically. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of small businesses that don't try and screw people over, and that don't try and take everyone's money, and don't turn into Walmart. And if you look at all the businesses in existence really in this country, it is kind of only a small percentage that are so greedy that have given, every capitalist a terrible name. But if you go to your local farmer's market, you go to a local any place like that, like, you're giving them money, they're providing a service, and that's kind of the end of it. And nothing really bad is happening with that. And I think as long as you're kind of staying with just the anarchy philosophy, you can still easily be a capitalist and just not be greedy and screw everybody over. Because barter, I think, is great. Like, I think all different kinds of systems to kind of exchange goods and get everybody what they need is great. But when you get to a lot of people, barter, sometimes you just don't have enough of the right things. So I think you should be able to still have things like capitalism and money, and just understand not to be greedy and don't screw people over with it.
Yeah, kind of to touch on that, and I think Be Damn Smart and EcoTorque mentioned something like this, but that we need to expand our way of thinking. That it is not efficient or in the way to be greedy, because you're extracting the value, and in a sense you're devaluing everything. That if what EcoTorque was saying, that that's what we learn from nature, is that we're all connected. So if one person is greedy and they're extracting value from the whole system. And what Be Damn Smart was saying is about that it's within everybody's interest and your own interests, if you look at things as the long view, is to strengthen other people's systems, because then you have different nations, as you strengthen your nation that you're trading with, or the collective that you're trading with your neighbor. If your neighbor has a nice house, and then you're able to have an organization, you strengthen these communities. Your life gets better in a real sense, and not this fake sense of. And I know kind of where Be Damn Smart was going, of where you're extracting the value via interest, making up this way to control other people through interest, but actually tethering it into real value, and expanding our view of what money is to be used and what it really is for, and but also factoring in this dynamic system of counting our attention, counting people's talents, and I think this is where the new way of things are going, because I've been in a couple of meetings, and this is what the debates kind of come down to. But EcoTorque?
Yeah, on money, it's got a bad name, and capitalism's got a bad name because of the banks, basically. I mean, they're stealing at least half of everybody's wages in interest. And it's incredible, actually, how people can even survive, let alone build a decent house and have a garden and all those other kind of things that people do with their industry, when half of their wages is being taken by interest to the banks. This has got to stop. That's the first thing, in my opinion, really, that has to be addressed before we're going to be able to evolve.
Yeah, you definitely got it on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not anti-capitalist at all. Capitalism to me is, say, for example, two guys working on a building site mixing concrete with a shovel by hand. It hurts your back. I've done it for years, and it hurts your back. One of them goes down the pub, buys 2 beers. The other one saves up and buys a concrete mixer. That's investing capital in your business, and that's capitalism, and I can't see anything wrong with it at all. So, and I don't have a problem with money itself. It's a tool, but it's being abused. I can take a chisel, I can go and make a door or a window or a carved beautiful statue with it, or I can go and stick it in somebody. It's the same chisel, and it's just the same with money. It's nothing wrong with the chisel itself. It's just being used in the wrong way. It's an instrument of slavery, the way it is at the moment. Money, instrument, simple as that. That's what it's being used for, and we've got to take it off those people and use it in a different way.
Yeah. And okay, Holly.
It's actually Lee, and
Hey,
I just popped in and I overheard, and I had something to say, and what I wanted to talk about really quickly is I wanted to talk about the greatest invention that's ever happened in 500 years or 1,000 years, or it could be the greatest invention that's actually ever happened. What that invention is the blockchain. And the reason why that invention is so incredible is because it gives us as a human society the ability to create an unmutable history. And so I sort of agree with you at Be Damn Smart about we need to look at in the past and see our history, but it's at this time currently impossible because what we have is hearsay. A textbook is a demonstrative statement. We have zero cryptographic verifiable evidence for anything. But what we can do with the blockchain is we can create an unmutable history, and we can even record lies in that history. And the cool thing about a blockchain is we can keep on recording subjects based in that category and that issue, or those places where lies might still rely upon the current belief system. But we can also create new information. We can build new information. We can add that to that particular part of the blockchain. And so what ends up happening is we build a true history, one that's unmutable, one that is cryptographically verifiable. And in most cases, it can be cryptographic, so that we can take everything that we think we know about the past and we can put it on the blockchain. And then as time goes on, we can start to get new information. We can add that to the blockchain. We can compare it. And we can condense it. And we can create a new reality based on the history that we know as absolute truth. One that's not based in hearsay. One that's not based in textbook demonstrative statements. Because basically, everything that we've been told since we were little babies has been a demonstrative statement. It's been zero cryptographic evidence, or even evidence. They tell me that people landed on the moon. Well, I don't know, because I don't have any evidence. They tell me that the world's round. They tell me the world's flat. I don't know. I have zero evidence. They've got science that explains all these things, but they're all theory. All science is theory, just about. But there are specific things that we can look at. I can grow an onion, and I can get a blockchain, and I can I can write down at every time that onion makes a new stage of life, and then goes to seed, and then does its thing, and then forever, the history of humanity will know how an onion works. All go to the blockchain. That's the reason why the blockchain is so incredible. It has zero to do with money and everything to do with an unmutable history. And that will be the end of money. And we'll have a different world, a much, much different world at that point.
You know what? Yeah, you know what I was just thinking right now when you were talking, Lee, is that the blockchain can function as the DNA for our society and humanity at large, where there's this feedback loop, right? The blockchain records information, and that if it that hearsay or whatever, so everybody could verify it. It's ruled by proof. So if that proof doesn't add up to the verification, and then it kind of forks away from that. That mutation, it doesn't have a good feedback loop with the environment. So then it forks away from that, and it forks towards the most beneficial route of us organizing and verifying and having this feedback loop.
I just wanted to jump in here. Just 2 seconds. I'm not going to take too much time. I just want to get back to the basics a little bit. I see there's 2 kinds of people on the planet. There's people that have personalities, and there's a few that have identities. So as long as we'll have personalities, we'll have greed, envy, and all the other sins. And it's important for if we want to build something new, we need people with identity. So what is identity? It's something or somebody that has identity doesn't or cannot be dominated in any way, shape, or form. So that's basically my definition of somebody with identity. The problem we have on the planet right now is domination, and it's coming from everywhere. Government, your boss, or whatever. So we need to remove that equation of domination in order to build something that will be sustainable. So that's my view on it.
Thank you, Tech Lords. And actually, we are coming up against the hour and a half where I want to keep shows around this. So, let's actually go with Boommeister to maybe go back. Let's kind of round things back to the biology of anarchy.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, Tech Lords, it's awesome to talk to you. I've been a huge fan of yours for a long time. I really like your, sorry, I have a little person climbing all over me. I really like your definition about having, personalities versus the other kind and how we need to get rid of domination. And yes, that can tag back into the biology part of that's the main thing with the world that is prevalent with biology is there is always some sort of dominating force, whether it's, an invasive species coming in or overpopulation or anything like that, that's the one key thing that every, piece of life has to deal with in terms of being able to survive long term is to keep that domination aspect in check and either get rid of it and kind of decide that you're not going to overpopulate or decide you're not going to be invasive, that sort of thing. And yeah, I think that's just a great direction for humans to go in because leading by that dominating force is usually not good for the species itself and not really good for the species that, get dominated essentially. So I hope that made sense.
Yeah, thank you. Now it's Corey. Corey. Your kind of thoughts on everything, your perspective on what we've been talking about, if you're still there. Okay. EcoTorque.
Yeah, I was very excited when I think it was Holly said about Science of Anarchy. It went plunk in my head like a, well, not plunk, rang like a bell, really, more likely. And then I carried on thinking about it, being a practical sort of person, more of an engineer. I thought about the engineering of anarchy. Okay, it's away from biology, but engineering is a verb. It's something we do. I've been trying to think of a way to use the word biology as a verb. I can't think of maybe the way, the growth or the, I don't know. Anyway, just that really, and just to really come back on the thing about the interest, we have to get rid of usury before there's going to be space for anything else. It's the absolute #1 thing we have to do before anarchy can grow. I think that's my thing. So thank you everybody. Thank you. It's been
Yeah, and this is what I like. We have a little bit of structure, and we were talking about earlier about structure and order, and then the chaos. That we had a little loose like structure, but then we kind of go off on a tangent. Then we kind of come back. We kind of go back, but it comes up with new ideas, and the progression, the evolution of this topic and this conversation is that we could branch out to the science of anarchy, the engineering of anarchy, and because we're kind of troubleshooting the best way to communicate it. And I think there is no one answer to rule them all, but that is going to take a whole series of coordinated, dynamic effort to combat that old story and create the new story, which I think kind of goes back to House is actually not here anymore, but kind of taking a couple steps back. That I think the new story is a lot like the old story, but now we have ghost spiders. Anything you want to express?
Yeah, I really sort of like all of the different comparisons we've been doing between nature and biology with anarchy, and I mean not even just anarchy, but sort of like Boomeister said, looking into all of these different systems of different species and being able to analyze, interpret, and adjust those things to meet human standards, I guess. And we continue on and on with these principles, sort of discussing them, which is great, and analyzing which ones we're going to carry with us into the future. And I think it'll definitely be a conversation for the times over definitely the next 3 or 4 decades that we will have to radically change the way that we govern human society.
Definitely. Now we got the Holly and Lee Collective. What do you guys and with your dev team?
Yeah, I think the dev team, they abandoned us to go play something on Steam. I'm not sure. But yes, we'll act as a collective right now. Enjoying a beautiful evening. I think it's now close to about 80 degrees, so it's wonderful. But yes, everyone's thoughts have been absolutely building on a great point to me. And that is that there is this huge world. There are what seem to be unsurmountable problems that may face us, but we have the means within our own minds right now to overcome this. I think that going back to a point that Boommeister made earlier, that we actually have to take a look at. Great, I just lost my thought. But I actually can just get it back right now. The natural course of things, if we take a look at it, will lead us to self-governance through science. There is enough evidence in this natural world that there's an abundance. It's all that we need. We have all of the tools that we need. We're at the go point right now. And I absolutely, to close out the thought, I do want to emphasize that there are tools that we may not know exist, that a lot of us may know exist, but I want to bring them up specifically. And those are looking to the people who are bringing about, talking about these new not necessarily new, but breakthroughs in how the mind works. Dr. Bruce Lipton, Dr. Joe Marshalla, a little bit older of a reference, Greg Braden. He's a little bit more of the new age group of thinkers, which I think we're moving past. That new age thing was the whole thing that happened, that culminated in the 80s, but it's still relevant because he ties in very well with what Lipton and Marshalla have to say. When you take a look at the big picture, there is knowledge that we can all implement to start with ourselves, with our minds, the way we work, the way we raise our children, the way we communicate with everyone in our society, the way where we're coming from, our perspective, whether we're more socialistic because we absolutely have to exist with a lot more people versus being in country settings. It's all about perspective. I enjoyed everyone's comments tonight, and I could post resources that anyone can follow. With a little help, maybe Satori, I'll figure out how to post some links that people can follow up with. Actually look at the talks that we've referenced, and I really appreciate everyone's time. This has been a great talk, and absolutely everyone. Lee, did you want to say?
I did. I have some final comments, and basically they're based on technology and where technology is leading us and how we can get into the science or what you said, the engineering of anarchy, and really what anarchy can mean to me is an entire society cooked to a internet. I start to look at how everybody's into games and creating virtual worlds so that we can all connect. I think we're all from almost all corners of the planet here on this panel show, or at least all over the continental United States. But virtual worlds where we can start to, can be any platform. Minds could be a game. Minds could be a virtual world. Like remember the old Second Life. This is where the world is heading. We're connected to these machines, and we're connecting to people all around the world. And the platforms that we're creating need to be different. They need to not be so wordy and blocky. It needs to be more virtual, and more games, and more sort of a gaming environment, because the world should be a game. It should be playful. And I think that's really a focus on I think the younger folks, my boys, they bring unbelievable ideas, and that I would have never thought of. And really, we're we're the old timers here, and getting the youth involved in these ideas is really, I think, key too. And creating a world where that world is changing rapidly, and all you have to do is talk to your local teenager. It's amazing, and you'll see that even the things that we're talking about are obsolete. But the one thing I did want to say, Tech Lord, thank you for your input on the last time. That's a very, very good thought, and I'll be meditating on that for a little bit. Thank you.
Yes, and Kevin, your turn, Kevin. Are you there, Kevin? Okay, be damn smart.
Hey, you skipped Tech Lords. Okay. The planned obsolescence of products, we can engineer that back out of the products, but right now the companies are utilizing that to their benefit, and then that's how, well, see, now it's a money thing. So, but if you have a product that works, why can't we engineer it to be efficient for the use that we have? So once we start getting into that, and like the Morin devices where we can produce energy in our garage, and we don't need to be hooked up to a line system. I think these things will come about, but the only part in anarchy that I do worry about is the law aspect. And as long as we get the basics right as far as understanding what right is and what wrong is, I don't think it'll be a problem, because it's the group that's enforcing or controlling that law. So, and then back on the money aspect, you can't do anything with interest. It has to go. And then just from that aspect alone, everything will flourish anyway. But nobody should have to worry about needs, only the wants. So when you do work, we'll say they're fun tickets instead of money. You would earn fun tickets to do the extra stuff, to go to extra places, or to go visit something from some faraway land or something. But,
I love fun tickets.
see, fun tickets is just a new way to look at money, but people shouldn't have to worry about needs. The group should fend for the group, and the needs shouldn't be a problem. So the only problem comes into is then claim of land, but the person that claims land and uses that land should have the right to do what they can on it and produce from it. So once you get further along, then it's a problem of, well, oh, I want that coastal piece of land, so like then you have to figure out a way to handle disputes such as that. But okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Tech Lords.
Well, I've listened to everyone tonight and I really enjoyed it. I just love these panel shows. We should have some more often, but it could be on any topic, actually. But yeah, I really want to come back to that identity versus personality. As long as we'll have personality or personalities handling whatever technology we have, we'll always have people taking advantage, abusing, or taking advantage of to the detriment of other people. So that's why it's important to build an identity. Identity is the most important thing humans will have to acquire. And like I said yesterday, the only way we could access our true identity is to understand the inner workings of the mind. And so that's about it.
Thank you. And Kevin, are you back? Are you ready to? Oh, okay. He has a call. Well, I like actually. We probably are going to start maybe doing a little bit more shows. We'll talk a little bit offline. But thanks for everybody for tuning in, and let's start thinking about producing fun tickets for everybody. But we also need to take care of our needs first. But fun tickets, I like that. Bye.